So you read this passage, the trouble with Pluto, which is really kind of interesting. But if you're not necessarily a big nonfiction fan, or if this isn't super interesting to you, it's definitely important that as you read, you highlight and you take some notes just to kind of help you stay focused and help you process the information so that when you hit the questions, you are not rereading the entire passage. In fact, as you know, I always recommend that you read the questions first so you have a purpose for reading and you kind of know what to note. So the first question is, read this sentence from paragraph 1. Quick, how many planets are there in the solar system? Based on the rest of the passage, why does the author introduce the topic in this way? So in this way, right, would be this question. But this is a really, really, really important part of the question, based on the rest of the passage. So this isn't a question just asking you to, just look at the technique in the moment when you first encounter it. It's after reflecting on the purpose of the text and the central idea of the text. What was the purpose of starting this way? We look at this text and we realize this is all about how the definition of what a planet is changes over time. And so solar objects that are at one point considered planets are, sometimes then no longer classified as planets. They're classified as something else, like moons. So you have to keep all of that in mind. So, you'll go back and reread that paragraph, but you're also going to think carefully about what the whole passage was doing and what the intention of the author was and the purpose and the message, all of that. And then we have this other question. Read the following paragraph, then select the sentence that introduces the idea that planets are categorized based on how they interact with other objects. So I have to look at that interaction with other objects. So when I went through this text, I just started by, first of all, underlining things that came up in the questions, but I also kind of just made notes to myself in my head or even on my paper about what I was learning in the different sections. And so, we kind of start with this idea that depending on who you talk to, there could be a different number of planets. So it was really interesting because that kind of introduced this concept that people can disagree about how to define planets. And I thought that was just really, really interesting. And so I circled the word disagreed. And I see here they defined planet in a way that kicked Pluto out of the planet tribe. They can revisit the definition of a planet. So this is something that can keep changing. And that was really, really interesting to me. And I felt like that's what the author was trying to establish here early on. And I noticed words like renaming and categorizing the various parts of the solar system. So I thought, again, just reinforcing that idea that what defines a planet changes, and it's been changing over time. This is something that's always evolving. When we have new observations and improvements in technology, they can cause us to have to rename objects that we originally classified as planets. So I thought that was really interesting. And then I looked at this next section and I noticed the way that, again, the definition of planet had evolved over time, and therefore the number of planets changed over time. I thought that was really, really interesting. And we get to, up to paragraph 9, because we know that's part of our questioning items. So I definitely noticed how it went from a high of 16 back to 6 when the objects circling planets were reclassified as moons. So that was really interesting. You see that interaction there. So when we look at these questions, we're going to go back to this first one. And if you look at option A, this is incorrect. Although, it does pose a question, the reason's not to provoke thought or reflection, but to cause a gut reaction. So it's not a difficult question. It's just going to point out a contrast with maybe what you believed about what qualifies as a planet. This one is also incorrect. The author may be using an effective tactic to hint to readers that she will be discussing the discovery of a new planet. However, the details in the paragraph suggest that the author's topic will discuss how objects are classified as planets. This one's also incorrect. While the author is posing a question to the reader, the intent is to show how the answer is more complicated than one might think, not to cause the reader to question or disagree with current scientific thinking. Again, if you're looking at the piece as a whole, that's definitely not the intention. So the answer is D. By beginning the passage in this way, the author is hinting that though the question appears very simple, the subject may be more complicated than the reader would originally think. And then when we look at this second one, only one of these fits this. Categorizing them based on how they interact with other objects. It went from a high of 16 back to 6 when objects circling planets were reclassified as moons. There's that interaction. This one does not discuss any interaction. This one also does not discuss the interactions and how they impact how planets are categorized. So the answer should have been this one. Remember, we always want to eliminate ones that we can tell for sure or wrong, and then think about the best answer.